WWE Attitude Era versus now. Every sport has eras. Basically, these are periods in the history of the sport, and the passing of the torch from one era to the other kind of signifies the fact that the sport has changed and evolved over time. When it comes to the WWE, there have been several eras that have marked and defined the sport, for better or worse. And as you can imagine, each of these eras has had its own crop of superstars come and go. One of the most prominent eras in the history of the WWE, however, was the Attitude Era. This was a brief period between about 1997 and 2002, and it brought with it a huge surge in popularity for professional wrestling in the United States. In this video, we'll be comparing the Attitude Era of the WWE with the sport's current period to see which we can define as being more interesting. What was the Attitude Era? Before we go into the actual comparisons, let's take a quick look back at the Attitude Era to really understand it. So there are different sources concerning when the Attitude Era actually ran, but most people tend to believe that it began in the late 90s and ran up until the early 2000s. This was a period in the history of American professional wrestling that was marked by significant switch in marketing and program selection. At this time, the WWE was still known as the WWF, and much of the marketing here was branded differently. Just as well, the rise of the Attitude Era was really down to a massive ratings battle between the WWF's Monday Night Raw and the Monday Nitro section of the World Championship Wrestling, or the WCW. Stone Cold Steve Austin was pretty much the biggest wrestler on the planet at this time, and after he defeated Jake Roberts to win the King of the Ring title in 1996, he debuted his Austin 316 promo. Officially, the Attitude Era was kicked off in November 1997 with wrestlers like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart championing the cause at that year's Survivor Series. Soon enough, more wrestlers saw themselves getting more screen time, and the WWF only continued to see higher ratings. Interestingly, this period also marked a rise in things like adult content for the WWF. Matches were more violent, there was more profanity, and we even got some R-rated segments. Basically, as the WWF got more popular, the entire programming appealed more to adult audiences. Across the United States and Canada, TV ratings and pay-per-view buy rates for the WWF and even several of its rival wrestling promotions went through the roof. In general, the Attitude Era saw the rise in prominence of names like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Chris Jericho, Triple H, Kane, Mick Foley, and even The Undertaker. Also, the period saw a resurgence of tag team wrestling, with teams like the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian being featured in TLC matches and destructive battles. Still, all things come to an end, and for the Attitude Era, things closed in May 2022 as the WWF rebranded to the WWE and ceased all WWF Attitude branding. This gave way to the ruthless Aggression Era, another era which we'll cover in a separate video. The Attitude Era, or now? Today, the WWE has changed significantly from what it used to be, and if you're a wrestling old head, then I'm pretty sure you've been nostalgic for the days of the Attitude Era and the stars who were made at that time. The WWE today comes with better in-ring action for sure, and with production technology also becoming significantly better, everyone's able to enjoy the action even more and to a grander scale. But if there's one thing you should know about WWE, it's that the stars themselves are also part of what makes the sport so compelling. So how do the stars actually compare? Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar. When it comes to the start of their respective eras, Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar pretty much are on the same level in terms of popularity and dominance. Now, the two men did have a gruesome battle at the main event of WrestleMania 19, the one which Brock won by pinfall. But Brock is still very much active today, after taking a very long hiatus from the WWE, and back in the Attitude Era, Kurt Angle was definitely that guy as well. Plus, considering the fact that WrestleMania 19 was well after the Attitude Era, we're actually looking at Kurt in his prime and comparing him to the current Brock. In general, this is a pretty tough contest, but I'd say we'd give it to Brock. The Beast has been dominating for well over a decade, even after coming back, and he's only aged like fine wine. Brock has consistently improved his craft, and he's easily the biggest name in the ring whenever he shows up, so yeah, Brock does it here. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Roman Reigns. Normally, this would have been a contest between Brock Lesnar and Stone Cold, but considering that Brock hasn't been active in a bit, you can kind of imagine why I'd want to switch things up and add the big dog instead. In the Attitude Era, no one was as big as Stone Cold. With his huge body and massive charisma, Stone Cold was an absolute showstopper. The moment you saw those beer cans, you knew it was about to be a good time. To be fair, Roman has also done pretty good for himself in the WWE. After the breakup of the Shield, Roman immediately went on to become a force of nature, running down the list of WWE superstars as he established himself as one of the most dominant names in the history of the sport. Still, I think I'd give this one to Stone Cold. In an era that was known for its aggressiveness and life-threatening matches, Stone Cold didn't just survive, he thrived, and he established himself as the undisputed leader of the pack. He had an amazing character, a killer signature move, and was capable of cutting amazing promos. Plus, his feuds with characters like Triple H and The Rock were the stuff of legend. In terms of sheer dominance, Stone Cold has this one thing in the bag. Roman might be more accomplished, but when you consider the caliber of guys who were gunning for the top spot in the Attitude Era, Stone Cold definitely stacks higher. The Undertaker versus Drew McIntyre. For this comparison, we're focusing more on the Ministry Undertaker and the Biker Undertaker. So the Undertaker who began and ran on that lengthy streak might not necessarily feature so much. Still, I don't think this one is particularly close. Now, don't get me wrong, I love me some Drew McIntyre. Ever since he came back into the limelight, he's really established himself with his athleticism and his sheer strength. But no matter how jacked the Scottish Warrior gets, he's just no match for the Dead Man. When Stone Cold and The Rock were too likable to be cast as villains, The Undertaker from the Ministry of Darkness came and donned that cape perfectly, and when he transitioned into a biker, that presence never really left him. There's no way this gets even close. The Rock versus Seth Rollins. Again, this is a bit of a mismatch, to be honest. When it comes to their builds, I'd say The Rock is more comparable to his cousin Roman Reigns, but Reigns has already been placed with Stone Cold, so let's look for the next guy, Seth freaking Rollins. Another member of the Shield, Seth went on an impressive solo run when the group broke up. In fact, thanks to a little help from the Authority, Seth was pushed as the most marketable asset on WWE. Still, in no version of the multiverse does Seth hold a candle against the Brahma Bull. Are you kidding? Look, even if The Rock came back to WWE today, he'd be a bigger draw than Seth. The Rock is easily on several wrestling fans' Mount Rushmore. It's not a competition, guys. Come on. Kane versus Braun Strowman. The reason why this comparison works so well is because both men are kind of similar. Braun started off as part of the Wyatt family, mostly acting as a hired hand for Bray Wyatt, rest his soul, and his henchmen. But soon, the WWE realized that he had a lot of potential as a foil to the likes of Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, and they quickly made Braun his own man. Similarly, Kane had always kind of played the background of The Undertaker. However, after the Dead Man took on that Enigma persona and only started showing up for a few fights a year, Kane really grew into his own. This comparison is definitely a head-scratcher, but I think I'd give the edge to Braun instead. For this one, it's more of a shame because I personally feel like the WWE never gave Kane a fair shake. For a guy who made a name for himself in both the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era, Kane was a pretty legendary figure. I just feel like his character's true potential was never really explored, and that ended up affecting him a great deal. Still, life isn't fair, and for this comparison, the monster among men takes home the prize. Triple H versus Randy Orton. Like the first comparison, we're looking at two men who spent a lot of screen time together. In fact, Randy really got his career start as part of the Evolution, a group during the Ruthless Aggression Era which was formed by Triple H. Whether as group mates or enemies, Randy and Hunter have definitely had their moments. Still, we're not necessarily comparing both men during this period. Instead, we're looking at Triple H in his much younger frame, as well as Randy Orton right now. The resumes of both Triple H and Randy need no introduction. These guys have the accolades to match, the legions of adoring fans, and the consideration of the company itself. Still, I'd give a very slight edge to Triple H. Impressive as he's been, Randy doesn't quite measure up to the game. You see, Triple H came up at a time when the WWE needed a really good villain, and like The Undertaker, he slid into that role perfectly. As for Randy, he was more of a staple in the Ruthless Aggression Era. Today, he's more of a capable veteran who can still do work when he needs to. So, yeah, Triple H takes this one. However way you slice it, both the Attitude Era and the current WWE landscape are two impressive periods, and all the stars who have shaped these eras deserve their place among the greats. But what do you think? Which of these eras is better for you? Let us know in the comments.